Jordan is hosting an emergency conference to coordinate the humanitarian response to Israel's war on Gaza. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to attend, and he's likely to hold talks with several regional leaders, including Jordan and Egypt. UN Secretary General Antony says more humanitarian aid needs to be allowed in.
All available routes into Gaza must be operational, and the land routes are absolutely crucial. I also welcome all coordinated efforts to fully operationalize the mechanism to facilitate aid into Gaza as mandated by Security Council Resolution 2720.
The international humanitarian response in Gaza has been severely lacking, with the delivery of aid facing obstacles at every level. Humanitarian access cannot wait for a ceasefire and cannot be subject to the political agendas of any party.
You're watching Al Jazeera. We're bringing you live coverage of the conference that's being held in Jordan. It's an emergency international conference working on the humanitarian response to Israel's war on Gaza. That was a round of applause that was just following a statement that had been made by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He said that the most important element of most important stage to be reached next was an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. He was outlining the phases of the ceasefire that had been put forward by US President Biden and subsequently agreed on by the United Nations Security Council. He said, however, that one thing stands in the way of this deal happening. It is Hamas. He then called on all the members gathered around the tables there to get Hamas to take the deal. He then went on to say there was going to be a further $404 million that was going to be pledged by the United States to help Palestinians in Gaza. And he outlined some stories of 3 children in Gaza who had been injured and had lost family members as a result of the Israeli action in Gaza. Now, we can go to Marwan Bishara. He's Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He's joining us from Paris. Marwan, I don't know how much of Antony Blinken's statement you were able to hear, but I actually want to take you back to something that was said by King Abdullah of Jordan. Jordan, of course, one of the hosts of this conference. Right at the start of this conference, he said, the people of Gaza are not looking to us for platitudes and speeches. They need action. And in many ways, that sums up exactly the problem that this conference is going to face. There's a lot of good intention, if you like. Making it happen is going to be very difficult.
Yes, I think he's correct. But nonetheless, that's what we have, a whole bunch of speeches. And of course, a bit too little and a bit too late for the people of Gaza. Most of those who are there in Amman, of course, have done not that much for the people of Gaza. Certainly, they didn't do enough to stop the war on Gaza. But he's also correct to say that humanitarian aid should not be conditional to a ceasefire. That, in his words, aid should start flowing in, medical and other humanitarian aid, regardless of what date the actual official ceasefire is reached. So in a sense, the necessity to end the war, the necessity to save the millions in Gaza from the wrath of Israeli war is, never more important than today. Yes, I did hear, Rob, I did hear the Secretary of State, of course, as usual, rolling my eyes endlessly. I'm worried about my eyes as I roll them endlessly, listening to Blinken. There's something surrealistic about listening to an American president recounting the disaster that Gaza has become, the destruction of hospitals and schools, the death of people, entire families, as if they were not killed by American ammunition, as if the United States did not block every attempt at an immediate and permanent ceasefire the past 8 months. But be that as it may, now we all learned the lesson once again that when it comes to America, it's either America's way or the highway. That in as far as America is concerned, American might is right and everything else is wrong. and hence until America passed its own resolution, taking in consideration a good number of points by other countries, including the Algerians and apparently the Russians and the Chinese, the resolution has passed, and Hamas has welcomed it. And yet, the Secretary of State continues to emphasize that now it's only up to Hamas and that everyone needs to pressure Hamas to accept a ceasefire, when in fact, not according to my opinion, Hamas and others in Gaza have died for a ceasefire. They have always been, for the past 8 months, dying for a ceasefire to take place. So if anything, the people in Gaza, including Hamas, want a ceasefire more than anyone else, including the United States and Israel.
The response from Israel to the ruling by the UN Security Council was significantly muted compared to what we've seen in the past. Previous occasions, Israel has been very, very strongly worded in its response to the way that some of those resolutions have been put forward before they've been voted on, and only 2 of them have passed, of course. Given the fact that this is a more muted response, is that a reflection of the fact that this is sponsored by the US? Does that kind of slightly box in the Israeli government when it comes to the way that it is going to be able to deal with or respond to this resolution?
Well, now that the proposal of a ceasefire leading eventually to a permanent ceasefire, in the words of Blinken, has been adopted by the UN Security Council, enshrined in international law, the Israelis have less wiggle room than before. And the Americans have indeed succeeded in boxing their ally into a bit of a corner. Now, having said that, being a student of the history of this conflict and of Israel's American attitude towards it, we know that the Israelis have once and again rejected or somehow bypassed international, including UN Security Council resolutions in the past. And I think they will probably try to do that again. It will be up to the Americans to discipline them. But judging from Blinken's per usual excuses for Israel, he is once again putting the onus on Hamas, not on Israel, when the Israelis wouldn't even come publicly and embrace the American proposal and the UN Security Council resolution. And they haven't done so because they actually don't like it. They certainly, as our correspondent said, they don't like at least the 3rd phase of it, which actually calls for total withdrawals of Israel from the occupied territory of Gaza, and for eventually the establishment of 2 states, with a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. These things are not to the liking of this Israeli government. I think we will face some major turbulences within the Israeli polity in the days and weeks to come.
Marwan, as always, thank you very much. Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get latest news from Al Jazeera.